Happy Hump Day, everyone. Joshua Severe Weather. The end of May, and tomorrow is the official start of the Atlantic hurricane season, and we've got some tropical potential coming up here in the next couple of days, especially if you're in Florida. So that's what I'm going to be mainly focusing my video on. Thank you for joining me this morning. I'm a meteorologist out of the Carolinas. We have not seen more than 10 minutes of sunshine at a time here since Thursday. So I know those of us in the Carolinas are getting antsy. It does look like some slightly better weather coming as we get the weekend started here, but at Florida's price. So let's take a look at the tropics here. Here's the graphic. And at this point, we're still just calling it some potential. I know there certainly are some models that support a low-end tropical storm forming here. It's probably going to happen, if it does, on the east side of Florida versus the Gulf of Mexico. Right now, conditions are not super favorable for any kind of organization of anything tropical the next couple of days. But like we saw with Tropical Storm Alex this time last year, we certainly had the heavy rain over South Florida. We had the tropical conditions, but we didn't have the circulation get together until everything moved away and then moved into the Southwest Atlantic. Different scenario here with how this system is formed, but kind of a similar forecast is what we're maybe expecting. So right now we're looking at about a 20% chance that this becomes a named storm. It is a chance, but it is something that's going to bring impactful weather no matter what. And as we get to the next couple of days, we definitely have the threat for heavy rain over South Florida and maybe some improvement of the drought conditions over parts of West Central Florida here in the coming days. So here is the El Nino index. You can see we are past the 0.5 mark. So we are definitely in an El Nino watch, but the trend over the last few days is starting to take shape that we're going to see an El Nino here forming this summer. And the big jump could be attributed to the intensity of severe tropical cyclone or super typhoon Mawar, which is now turning away from Taiwan and the Philippines. Believe it or not, that cooling of the waters in the West Pacific is warming things up in the Central Pacific. It's kind of a cycle where one has to balance the other. So that is actually kind of kickstarting our El Nino. And I do believe when we get through June and July, we're going to see an El Nino taking place. How strong it gets, still up for debate. I've seen some models that show it peaking in the fall and then starting to level off in the winter. Others which make it super strong. Again, it's really too soon to make that call. But typically speaking, the El Nino does lead to fewer storms impacting the United States and the Western Atlantic and the Caribbean in the tropical season than average. Do I think that's necessarily the case? Maybe, maybe not, but it could mean some weaker storms here in the shorter term. So I did put a poll up on my YouTube channel yesterday asking you how many hurricanes I thought you would think would hit the United States. And a lot of you actually chose 4 or more. And the meteorology behind El Nino actually does not go in your favor. And I really hope that that's the case, but we're going to keep an eye on it nonetheless. So here's our area that we're watching, a 10% chance for formation through Friday morning, and then a 20% chance through next Wednesday. And more than likely that formation, if it happens, is going to be on the Atlantic side of things due to some wow. Very unfavorable conditions due to the wind shear that we're looking at here over the next couple of days in the Gulf, which may relax some as we get into the Atlantic side of things. Here's a look at the water vapor imagery over the United States. You can see our upper level low forming here. It's south of Mobile Bay, right over the middle of the Gulf of Mexico. All the thunderstorms are on the east side of it, dry air coming in on the west side of it. You can see there's a lot of moisture coming up into the Western Atlantic. Here is the remains of the storm that impacted the Carolinas and Georgia over the weekend. It is still spinning over the Western Atlantic waters east of Virginia here. Here's our next system that we're keeping an eye on, produced a lot of severe wind and even a couple of tornado reports in eastern Colorado, Kansas, northern parts of Texas. We're dealing with some flooding in the Amarillo area right now, just a lot of rain over the last few days. I know some of you in West Texas were begging for rain. I don't think this is how you wanted this drought to end, but unfortunately we're dealing with heavy rain. And you can see there's an upper low moving through southern Cal. That's going to head into the southwest and continue to bring unsettled weather across the Rockies and the high plains over the next several days. So we have some places that are cashing in on beautiful weather, warm weather if you're in the Great Lakes region and Northeast. Other places that are stuck in a very unsettled pattern, mainly the Southeast and the plains and Rockies here. And nothing is moving quickly at this point. A wider view of the tropics You can see, look how moist things are in the upper levels. We're starting to see things coming alive a little bit more in the intratropical convergence zone, the ITCZ, especially on the Pacific side. This is due to the phase change in the Madden-Julian Oscillation, now getting into a more favorable phase where we could see lifting of air and more moisture in place. We weren't in that favorable phase, but now we're heading that way. There's no immediate threat at this point of anything organized going, but we're obviously going to have to keep an eye on things. Models tend to struggle in this part of the country, in this part of the world, with tropical development, but now we're heading into a phase that is going to start to be more favorable for gradual development of storms on the Pacific side. On the Atlantic side, a massive wave right now leaving Senegal and Guinea-Bissau, heading across the eastern Atlantic, but in its path is going to be a lot of wind shear. You can kind of see here this general flow. I wish I could, maybe I can put this up here. Yeah, let's draw on here, annotate. Sorry, everything moves in slow motion on my screen here, but let me draw and show you what we're talking about. So we've got this huge area of storms coming off the Atlantic, but look at this wind shear up here. That is going to kill off any kind of organization of storms. As this moves west, it's going to get killed in this region. So we're not going to see any kind of Cape Verde type storms at this point, but certainly something we're keeping an eye on. Here's our upper level low over the Gulf. This is going to track kind of south and east and then right across South Florida and then up into this area. We've got this upper level low here that is going to continue to be in the area, and then a bigger trough is going to form another upper level low. That's going to cool us off this weekend in New England. That's actually going to back up and suppress this system and keep it tracking away from the Carolinas and maybe more towards Bermuda and the Southwest Atlantic. So that's what I'm watching for you guys here at this point. Here is a look at the, let me get this off the screen here. Here's a look at the visible image, and you can see really a lot of moisture, a lot of instability here over the central and eastern Gulf, but not a lot of organization. This is all in the upper levels and nothing forming in the lower levels at this point. So we're not going to see a system very quickly spinning up, and we're probably not going to see tropical storm conditions on the west coast of Florida. However, we're certainly still going to see that moisture coming into place. You can see this is the mid-level flow, and it is out of the south. The anticyclone is actually southwest of our main feature. It's not lined up, so until that system becomes what we call vertically stacked, where it organizes from the ground up, it's going to struggle to form. So that's kind of what we're looking at here. Here's a look at the upper level wind pattern. You can see kind of a lull in between our two upper level highs, the one over the Southeast Caribbean, the one off the Mexican coast. But we see strong flow aloft out of the southwest here underneath this system, and that creates unfavorable wind shear over most of the Gulf. The wind shear is more favorable on the Gulf Coast and across Arkansas than it is with this fast flow aloft coming through the Gulf from Texas and then swinging up through Florida. So until we get out of the reds and see more yellows and greens, we're going to have a hard time getting an organized storm system going. But this is actually forecast to move eastward and put it into a better spot where the storm can grow and maybe become more organized. So that leads us to a small chance for tropical depression forming either near or east of South Florida here. This is going to be on Saturday and Saturday night. This is Sunday. You can see a better chance after the system moves out of Florida and moves along the southeast coast, not really near the coast, but offshore. And then this is Monday into Monday night. And again, the chances aren't great, but they are there for some form of development after the storm is moving away from the Carolinas. So this is unlike the system we had over the weekend that came right into South Carolina and North Carolina. This is going to be paralleling the coast and then moving away. And really our window is pretty small for development, but we certainly could see a low-end subtropical or tropical storm. The name on the list that we're looking at is Arlene, and that would come probably Sunday, Monday, or Tuesday of next week. I'm going to move past this here. We're going to talk about some smoke in the Northeast. We've had wildfires here over southwestern Nova Scotia, and you can see the smoke has been getting carried away to the east, but yesterday the flow actually brought it in to southern New England and New York City, New Jersey, and that continues to be the case here today. We can see smoky conditions here in the lower levels impacting Philadelphia, York, Pennsylvania, Frederick, Maryland, Hagerstown, certainly Rhode Island and southern Connecticut, as well as eventually Long Island here tomorrow morning. And eventually this disperses some, but definitely something we're watching in Nova Scotia here for maybe additional wildfires. It's hot and dry. It's been an unusually strong upper level ridge this week, and additional smoke could form here and get carried back to the west across New England. So I'm keeping an eye on that for you. The active weather continues here in the Plains and Rockies. We do see a marginal risk for severe weather in places like Denver and Cheyenne, a slight risk in eastern New Mexico, West Texas, and the Oklahoma Panhandle. As we get to tomorrow, this chance does lessen, but it continues to target the same area. At this point, we're dealing with more of a heavy rain threat, but there could be severe weather, certainly. And as we get to Friday, another slight risk gets introduced into southwest Texas, including Midland, Odessa, and getting up to about Lubbock, Texas. And then the chances are lower as we get to the weekend for any kind of certain severe weather. But the same area gets targeted here for severe weather over the next couple of days. All right, let's look at tropics here. We'll get back to the U.S. in a minute. Here's a European. You can see our upper level low west of Florida. This is going to be tomorrow afternoon. Bigger upper low over the Atlantic. We do see a ridge of high pressure building into the eastern Atlantic, and that is going to slowly build back to the west and set up more easterly trades coming off of Africa. Over the Gulf, after this upper level low leaves, it starts to get picked up by another piece of energy dropping down through New England. This is going to be a backdoor cold front that cools off New England and puts our heat wave to an end. This is going to try to attract the system northeastward, but it probably is going to lead to more wind shear than anything else. So we have a very small window where this system could get going, but rather than heading up and sticking around into the hair of Carolinians and Virginians like it did this past week, this is going to be heading away, and we're going to see cooler, dry air following next week across the Northeast after this boundary leaves the area. Beyond that, we see generally still some unsettled weather across Texas, and this moisture heads into the southeast. But we eventually will see high pressure building over the southern Gulf here next week, and that is going to lead to less favorable weather for tropical development that impacts the southeastern United States. So really our window is the next 9 to 10 days at this point. Here's the probability of seeing some gustier winds, and as we get into Sunday and Monday, you'll see the winds are going to pick up over the East Coast here. It's going to be a very rough day at the beach on Sunday. A lot of this is created by our low pressure system forming east of Florida. The other part of it is high pressure building down. This trough's going to kick in that drier air mass, and it's going to lead to stronger winds off the North Carolina coast. We could see gusts of 40 to 50 miles per hour just off the Outer Banks, but then those winds relax as we get to early next week and a lot quieter weather after that. Here's a look at our surface chart. This is the European showing our gradual development of some form of weak surface low here over the central and eastern Gulf Thursday night, and lowering pressures here by Friday. And you can see still just a lot of lower pressure, but nothing really expected to coalesce into a surface circulation. So development is going to be very tough at this point. As we get to Saturday night and Sunday, as this low moves away and affects the northern Bahamas, we may see a circulation form, but nothing super organized. So a very low-end tropical event if the European is right. The ICON model is the one that's been the most bullish on this. It shows low pressure slowly forming here over the east central Gulf by Friday morning, and then deepening and then moving across South Florida as a tropical storm. I think this is probably the least likely scenario, but I do want to show it just in case this does try to happen. With the wind shear, it's going to be tough to get something like this to deepen, but notice it takes it over South Florida quickly and it leaves on Sunday. So this is going to be a Friday, Saturday rain event for South Florida, and then it is still intensifying as it moves away and maybe affects Bermuda here early next week. But notice it's not showing it wrapping around here near the Georgia, South Carolina coast anymore like yesterday's model runs did. It kicks it out to sea, and that means improving weather for Florida here early next week and improving weather for the southeast as well. Here's the GFS model, and you can see the GFS is the one that shows the least likely development. It actually has more development with this upper low jumping off the east coast of Florida and actually developing something over here, and that kills the chances of this happening. I don't know if the GFS has a good handle on it, but it may be onto something at this point, but it just doesn't show anything organized going. It actually shows a non-tropical low moving up the North Carolina coast on Tuesday, and that, of course, would mean more wet weather for the Carolinas here, but it is not in line with the other models at this point. And then, interestingly, the NAM actually has a surface low over the Outer Banks here later today, backing into the Inner Banks and right down the coast of North Carolina tonight into tomorrow night. A weak low pressure system, but what it is going to do is going to bring the cloud cover back in, send the moisture levels back up, and bring some more showers to the coast. So beach weather here over the next 2 days, not looking great in North Carolina, and eventually Myrtle Beach could see some of these showers here by late tomorrow night and into the day Friday. It'll be a little bit windy as well. Nothing tropical. You can see nothing's really filled in here, but kind of a smaller scale feature that we're going to keep an eye on as well. Now, a big picture of the European, you can see where the wetness is. Florida, right now, it's looking like it's going to be drier than average over a good chunk of the Midwest and the Great Lakes. And as well as the Northwest, it's going to be wetter than average here over Texas, Oklahoma, right on up into the Rockies. Very wet weather continues. As we get into next week, you'll see drier weather returns to Florida in between systems. And then this wetness from the Rockies spreads east across Texas into Louisiana. And next week could be pretty darn wet here over the western Gulf states. We're going to have to keep an eye on the Gulf as well with this moisture in place. But definitely a drier week next week over the southeast, with the exception of Louisiana, Mississippi, and eventually Alabama. The dryness continues over the upper Midwest as it heats up. We will see some rain, though, above average rain moving into the Great Lakes region and across the prairies of Canada as well. You can see in Florida, we are going to see some wet weather today, maybe over an inch around West Palm Beach, Port St. Lucie. Heavier amounts stay west of the Florida Peninsula here through tomorrow, but still a lot of moisture over the Bahamas and the east coast of Florida. We do see some buildup of moisture as well across the Panhandle tomorrow. And then our best chance for rain looks like it's going to be on Saturday over the Florida Peninsula, potentially 2 to 4 inches of rain over central and especially South Florida and the Florida Keys over the weekend. And that moisture doesn't really build up to the Carolinas so much as it is more off the Space Coast here of Florida at this point. So we're going to see above average precipitation. Getting wet in Texas as well. More heavy rains here impacting the Panhandle, eastern New Mexico. As we get later into the weekend, we see that rain and moisture moving across Oklahoma and North Texas. And then as we get into next week, you can see it's going to get a lot wetter across central and east Texas, with generally 2 to 4 inches of rain falling across this entire region. And that includes Louisiana as well towards the second part of next week. Still pretty windy here over the outer banks of North Carolina. You can see wind gusts of 40 to 50 miles per hour possible this weekend. It may not rain all weekend like last weekend, but it's going to be windy and cloudier. So definitely not a good beach weekend once again here in the Carolinas or in the Tidewater of Virginia, or really even up into the Delaware beaches as well. It's going to be pretty windy all the way down to northeastern Florida. Whether or not we have a tropical system, we still have that energy aloft that's going to bring us that tightening surface pressure. Continues to stay pretty darn toasty here across eastern Canada, the Great Lakes, and Northeast, but we do see some cooler weather backing into New England here over the weekend. The Southeast stays cooler than average. I'm in Raleigh, and I have not hit 90 degrees yet this year. A good chunk of the Northeast, the Great Lakes, even Chicago has. So just kind of a backwards summer here in the Southeast, but we're okay with that. It's lowering the energy bills for sure. But as we get into next week, you'll see it's going to be a cooler week over the Northeast altogether and a warmer week over the Southeast, while Florida stays kind of wet and a little bit cooler than average. And the Southwest continues to have that cooler weather. So kind of a flip-flop here from what we saw in the spring, where it was so hot in the southern U.S. Now it's cooler than average in the southern U.S., hotter than average in the northern U.S., and then cooling off over eastern Canada and New England as well. Going to show you highs today. You can see pretty toasty here over the Great Lakes and the Northeast. Not too bad in the Mid-Atlantic region. Tomorrow, it's starting to warm up more across much of the country here, especially the Northeast. Still pretty toasty on Friday, but starting to cool off across New England, and then cooling off in the Northeast, and then eventually that cool air jumps back down into the Carolinas here on Sunday. And then you can see the heat starts to cool as we have a cold front that pushes south and west here and cools us back off to near or below average in the Great Lakes Tuesday. I was going to zoom in and show you guys the Northeast here real quick. Here we go. Record highs again in parts of Maine. 90 in Burlington, 91 in Caribou, 83 in Bangor today. Tomorrow actually looks like a hotter day across the Northeast and New England. 90s across many inland areas. 80s in places like Boston, New York City, and Philadelphia. Friday is going to be even hotter over the Northeast while it starts cooling down over the North Country here. Definitely cooler on Saturday, though. You can see the record highs go away. Still hot, though, in the mid-Ohio Valley, but back closer to average in the Northeast and below average across New England. And then Sunday should be a more typical day. And then Monday into Tuesday, we start to see some warming in the Northeast, but it still remains near average. A look at the Midwest here, you can see we may see a record high or two across Michigan and Wisconsin today. And tomorrow we're back into the lower 90s. Record high possible in Madison, Wisconsin on Friday. as well as near Youngstown, 91 degrees on Friday. Saturday, still some record heat possible here over the Ohio Valley. We'll see some mid-90s showing up in St. Louis. So a great day to hit the pools here across the Ohio Valley on Saturday. Sunday, still pretty warm, although we're dropping out of record territory. And then we'll see the cool down coming here early next week. Finally, in the Pacific, this is Typhoon Mawar, still holding on, still has an eye, but it is losing a lot of convection. This is Taiwan. It is going to stay and turn off to the northeast and impact Okinawa here. You can see that forecast track. In the cooler waters, it's going to weaken and eventually become non-tropical by the time it passes Japan here early next week. So no additional threat from this storm finally as it begins to hit that cooler water. Thank you so much for your time today. If you enjoyed this video, please consider subscribing to my YouTube channel. I'll have another video coming up here probably tomorrow morning. I really appreciate your time. And for those of you who have been watching, you know that I want to give all the glory to God who gives me the strength to do this. My faith is very important, and God has called me to do this, to share my faith with you, to share the weather, and to help save lives. Hebrews 11:1, faith is the assurance of things hoped for, the conviction of things not seen. And as a meteorologist, I think you really do need to go out on faith that all these weather conditions put into models are going to produce a good forecast. We know over time that the certainty level drops off. I think you can say that for anything in life, but God is here with us, and he is not here to turn his backs on us. All we have to do is to go off of that assurance. That is the guarantee that things that we hope for will be provided by God. In fact, the F in faith stands for forever knowing God loves me totally and unconditionally. The A stands for ably meeting any problem with hope and confidence. The I stands for in truth, believing in the life, death, and resurrection of Jesus Christ. The T stands for totally trusting in God, and the H stands for having eyes that see the God that cannot be seen. And faith comes by the belief in things that we don't see, and believing that God is never going to forsake us, and that eternal life is there for us due to the sacrifice of Jesus Christ, who is here to save us from all of our sins and save us eternally. And I just wanted to share that good news for you, because I operate in faith, because fear is just false evidence appearing real. Faith is the assurance of things that we've hoped for. And I don't know about you guys, but looking back at the past, looking at the future, and being unhappy with it all leads to instability in life. But knowing that God is with us leads to goodness and leads to joy. And I choose to operate in joy, and I really pray that you do as well. I appreciate y'all's prayers. If you have any prayer requests, happy to pray for you as well. And I hope you have a wonderful day. God bless you.